Welcome, friends and neighbors, brothers and sisters, all you citizens of the world. Welcome to another edition of Heartland at Home. This is number 40, what is number? 42, my favorite number. And we got a couple of wonderful guests today. A little bit later on, we're going to have the incomparable jaunty rocker, our pal Jon Langford, and we're going to have Dr. Rachel Rubin, head of Cook County Health. We're going to learn a lot about the pandemic. So we're going to go forward by starting off asking Thom to tell us what's good in his life this week.
Well, the best thing about my life this week was checking out a new recipe with cauliflower. We all know how we love that inexpensive vegetable, and I figured out an au gratin recipe that really worked. Katie, what about you?
This week I have been reflecting on my 6-year engagement with Network 49 and how many great things have been accomplished by this group and how proud I am of them and our continued activism.
Oh, you're underplaying, Katie. You stopped charter schools from expanding. You framed balanced development discussions in the neighborhood. We elected a new alderwoman. We raised electoral transparency issues that committeemen kept deciding on their own. And before Laquan McDonald was a household name, we were working on police reform that was real. So Network 49, congratulations for Michael Harrington and Katy Hogan's leadership. Really superb work, you guys. Michael, what's good with you?
That was really nicely said about Katie and even Michael Harrington. And Thom, I just want to point out that you're a very influential guy, and now the price of cauliflower is going to go through the roof. So I'm a little disappointed on that because I too like cauliflower. One of the best things that happened to me this week was when my friend Katy Hogan was coming over to talk a little bit about a project we're working on. And she pointed out that across the street from my house at the field school, there was a horde of young soccer players with shovels shoveling off the soccer field. They actually were putting the snow onto the track, which inhibits some people, but then there was a game and it was, cold out there. It was kind of balmy, but it was great to see because spring is on the way and people will be out playing and we're all about that.
Well, that reminds me that part of our theme for a while now in this Heartland at Home series we've been doing because of the pandemic is our belief that nothing should go back to normal because normal wasn't working. If we go back to the way things were, we will have lost the lesson. So may we rise and do better with our post-pandemic reality. Thom, I know you've been following this story. What about the what's
well,
good
one
for
thing the
Lincoln
residents
Park
of the 10th Ward don't want to return to normal about is that their community continues to be a dumping ground for environmentally challenged businesses. What's not good enough for Lincoln Park apparently is just fine for brown and black communities, according to the mayor, who wants to approve a permit for General Iron to reset up shop to scrap metal from all those cars and other things that alley entrepreneurs pick up. They have a much longer haul to now make from north side alleys to the far southeast side, but we are now coming up on a month where upwards of 10 hunger strikers have been trying to get the mayor to deny this operating permit. This story has gotten bigger and bigger. Federal government's involved. The state passed off on something they shouldn't have passed off on. We'll see how this continues to develop, but these folks need our support. A month on a hunger fast is not easy, and of course, their own health is now at risk. On behalf of the residents of the 10th Ward, we wish them the best. An interesting study came out alongside this that points out just how many brownfields and other environmentally challenged sites there are in the southeast region and northwestern Indiana. The Calumet Collaborative is trying to push the economic development potential for some of these sites. So it's an interesting, looking forward, maybe there are some chances to turn around what is otherwise a tough piece of turf.
And on the labor and minimum wage watch, let's talk a little bit about the workers trying to build a union at Amazon in Bessemer, Alabama. It's more than just a local issue. It has national implications. Amazon has been caught red-handed many times trying to block the attempts to start a union. They've been pushed back a little bit. Unions have come out in support. The National Football League has come out in support of the unionizing effort. Stacey Abrams, and now President Biden came out with a very strong statement saying every worker should have a free and fair choice to join a union. So we will keep you posted on this. It's a lot more than the $15 an hour. It has to do with working conditions, benefits, etc. We're rooting for the workers trying to form a union at Amazon and Bessemer, and we will keep you posted.
So, Katie, how are the Republicans doing opening up opportunities for voting?
As well as ever, as well as ever. Further proof that Republicans know they can't win fairly held elections. What passed the Georgia legislature this past week, House Bill 531, requires even more identification to be shown for absentee voting, limits, again, the number of ballot boxes, curtails weekend voting, souls to the polls. The measure is now heading to the Republican-controlled Senate, where a committee voted to end no excuse absentee voting.
And that's just one state.
Yeah,
there are over
Georgia.
2,000 different actions going on in state legislators to curtail the vote. Republicans just can't pull it off anymore. They have to cheat in order to win.
Well, the other half of it is that the GOP appointed Supreme Court just overturned two lowercase throwing away of some of those same scams about keeping people from voting. The SCOTUS just upheld those exact practices. So they are undermining.
The Supreme Court's being undermined by the partisan politics the GOP has brought to jurisprudence, and they're going to regret it.
Okay, so let's go to the, our main topic, right?
COVID update.
Indeed.
Hey, COVID.
Did you hear the former president got a vaccine?
Yeah, he did. Didn't he do that before? Wasn't he already vaccinated?
Apparently not. Well, there weren't vaccines when he supposedly caught the virus quite yet. But
you're talking.
I don't fault the guy. He's in the right age group. But I know a lot of seniors who are still waiting to get their first shot. So, it's pretty amazing.
I think that given that the vaccine numbers are moving from 2 to 3, which is wonderful, and the last one being only one shot, which makes it possibly more, and not requiring that deep freeze thing, possibly making it more portable and allowing us to finally see some real attempts to get to the folks who cannot get to the United Center.
Under increasing pressure, the mayor has allowed restaurants to expand their capacity to operate. I really think we're moving too fast here. What's another couple of months to let everyone get vaccinated? And even the new head of the CDC made it clear we need to wear masks, at least until fall, if we want to be safe and stop this thing. Come on, folks, be smart. Mask up, all right? We'll hear a lot more of this with our next guest, Rachel Rubin. And let's go down memory lane a little bit. 40 years ago, a pretty famous song about the apartheid movement came out by Peter Gabriel, Biko, and they've just issued a new version of it through Playing for Change. So now a little bit from Biko. welcome to Heartland at Home a good friend and a public health official, Dr. Rachel Rubin. She is the Senior Medical Officer for Cook County Department of Public Health. She's also an attending physician at Stroger Hospital. Thanks very much for joining us this morning, Rachel. When we first met, you and your colleagues were working on the anti-apartheid movement in Africa, South Africa. Now you're Cook County's Chief Medical Officer. When you started in medicine, did you ever think you would end up with this kind of a position and role in the middle of a worldwide pandemic?
No, not at all. It's been, it's been a life transforming thing. I never would have expected this at all, to be in the middle of a pandemic and to be a leader of my health department in that respect. Yeah.
Let me ask you about the vaccines. We have 3 vaccines now.
Right.
It's a huge scientific breakthrough. Has it taken too long? Has it been fast enough? What's the story on the supplies getting distributed? Give us a little overview on the vaccine situation.
Sure. I think that the development of the vaccines were fast-tracked, but I think appropriately so. I don't think that corners were cut. That what's happened is that the observation period for the vaccine, not for safety and efficacy, so for how well it's going to work and how safe it is, they didn't cut any corners in that respect at all for any of these 3 vaccines we have and the others coming up. But what was shortened was sort of the observation period that gives us more information about how long the immunity is going to last after a vaccine, and are you going to need a booster, and how often are you going to need a booster. So those are the kinds of things that we get as time goes by, because the individuals that were in the original studies are continuing to be observed and their blood is being checked for antibodies, and we see how long their immunity is lasting. And so far, the vaccine trials that started last summer, those individuals that were in those trials with the Pfizer and the Moderna, that they still have most of them still have significant antibodies, 8 months along. So the hope is that the immunity lasts for at least a year or longer. But there may have to be booster shots, especially with these newer variants, these newer strains that are coming out. So that's sort of about sort of the development in 20 seconds about the vaccines, is that I think that there were corners were not cut in terms of safety and efficacy. And I think that the first 2 vaccines that came out were based on a somewhat newer technology, but it's not a new technology overall. It's a technology that's been in use and has been well studied at least over the last 10 years. And now it's being applied specifically to vaccine, which it hadn't been in the past because there wasn't funding and support for doing that. But then that came about over the last year. And then the Moderna vaccine is using what's called an adenovirus. Not the Moderna, I'm sorry, the Johnson & Johnson that just came out uses a different technology, but it's a technology that has been well used before for developing other kinds of vaccines. And it uses a virus itself, but a virus that doesn't cause illness in humans, a particular kind of adenovirus. And that virus is like killed. It's not live. Or it's sort of like what we say, it's at least attenuated, so it doesn't cause any illness at all. And it becomes like the carrier for the component that will stimulate the antibodies in our body against the coronavirus. And so it's like a carrier for developing the immune response against these little spike proteins, which are those, the pretty pictures of the virus. They're really beautiful pictures, but it's deadly, right? And it's the little spike proteins that come out of the shell of the virus, of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, are what causes it to attach to the cells and then to cause illness. And so those are what need to be attacked so that it doesn't then stimulate an inflammatory response and an illness in the body. So all of these vaccines, go ahead.
Well, now that we have these vaccines, many of us tried to sign up and there were no shots available.
Right.
There were no slots. So are you ready to ramp up now that there's more supply? What was the issue there?
No, that's a good question. And I should be segueing to more about vaccine supply. Absolutely. The supply has been limited. And as soon as we get the supply, we inventory it and we push it out to our partners. And in suburban Cook County, which is my jurisdiction, We have over 140 partners, not only internally within the Cook County Health System, where we have set up these mass sites, like at Tinley Park, and one that's going to be opening up in Des Plaines, and at Triton College and South Suburban College. Those are sort of larger sites, but we also are working with federally qualified health centers and with local pharmacy chains, and the 15 hospitals in the suburban area. And the city is doing similarly. So there have been plenty of vaccination sites available, and the problem has been supply of vaccine. And as soon as we get it, we try to push it out. And now that we have a second vaccine, Johnson and Johnson, or J&J as we're calling it, that should help, because the more vaccine in the pipeline, the more we can push out and the faster we can do it. But it doesn't mean that all of a sudden, now that we have Johnson and Johnson, all of a sudden now we have more vaccine. That's also very limited. And all of these vaccines, whether it's Moderna, Pfizer, Johnson and Johnson, whether we eventually get the AstraZeneca or any other vaccines that are not on the market yet here, it's a matter of production has to be ramped up. And one thing that the Biden administration has done is that they have invoked what the Defense Production Act, which allows the government to deploy other manufacturing facilities to start to then produce vaccine. And for example, that's what's happening with Johnson and Johnson. So it's not only going to be Johnson and Johnson producing their vaccine, but which pharmaceutical, there's another pharmaceutical company that just slipped my mind that is now partnering with Johnson and Johnson, and they will now also be producing the J&J. So it's really not that all of a sudden now we're going to have a whole bunch more vaccine. It's coming out, it's trickling out a little at a time, and we're getting and for a while we were getting a fair amount, and then it's sort of leveled out and gone down. And now hopefully we'll begin to trickle up in terms of our supply. And we're hoping that that production will continue to increase, but it's incremental. It's not all of a sudden that we're going to be flooded with a whole bunch of doses of vaccine, and then we don't have ways of putting it into people's arms. I think that we have the infrastructure set up to put it into people's arms once we get it.
Dr. Rachel Rubin, now that you're talking to three people who have, two of whom have had both shots, the third of whom will get his second shot within the week. There's still so much we don't know. And what are the safety measures you think we should still be taking, even after, half of us are vaccinated? And by the way, county is doing a great job. The city should catch up, but more on that later. Safety measures.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
No, I'm so glad you brought that up, because even if you've been vaccinated, you have to wear a mask. You have to maintain your physical distancing. Please avoid large crowds. Don't, thank you. Yeah. And make sure you have the right kind of mask. It has to be multiple layers, at least 2 or 3 layers, whether it's a surgical mask or a cloth mask. All of those measures still need to be maintained for a couple of reasons. One is that even though it looks like a lot of vaccination is going out there right now, for example, in the state of Illinois, we've only vaccinated maybe about 10% of the population.
Right.
So there are a lot of people out there that are still susceptible to getting the virus. Also, with these new variants coming out, these new strains, the current vaccine that we're all getting may not be as effective. It will work somewhat, but it may not be as effective for these newer strains. And there may be a booster we're going to have to take in a few months, and those are being developed now. So we need to be careful overall. One thing we do know about the vaccines, and this has been shown in the studies, and it has been borne out now that we've been using several of them for 3 months, is that even if you get the virus, you're likely to get a much milder version of it, even if you've been after vaccination. So when you've been vaccinated, it at least should protect you from getting severe illness requiring hospitalization or even potentially leading to death. But that being said, we still need to protect each other through the appropriate, mitigation, things that we're talking about. Like, that's why restaurants are not fully open. We're at 50% capacity. We need to maintain that. We need to wear our masks. We need to watch our distance. It doesn't mean we can now go out and do whatever we were doing a year ago.
As a public health practitioner, both an activist and now a doctor, the pandemic must also present an exciting time in your professional career. What's been exciting for you as a practitioner about this crisis?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost sort of, I wouldn't say like an adrenaline high, but every day is different. It's constantly having to have my brain working on like all cylinders, constantly in meetings, especially with my co-lead in the department, constantly on calls and doing planning and giving advice and logistical stuff. And so it's been, it's like being on hyperdrive for the last year. And in fact, in suburban Cook and the city, the very first 2 cases in the state of Illinois were also within the first 5 cases in the United States was January 23rd, 2020. So that was our 1-year anniversary where Dr. Joshi, Kiran, and I, my partner, were sort of on the ground in the conference centers of 2 major hospitals in the suburban area, setting up command centers with the CDC and the Illinois Department of Public Health and Chicago Department of Public Health, and trying to figure out protocols and how are we going to approach this. And at that point, we didn't even know how it was transmitted or what the main mode of transmission was. At first, we thought it was from surfaces. And we do know it can be transmitted from surfaces, but that's really very minor mode of transmission. We now know, right, that it's mainly through respiratory droplets. And so we didn't know all of that then. And so it's been a learning curve also. And so it has been very exciting. I mean, it's been exciting professionally or intellectually, for sure. And, to learn how to, you're sort of like learning on the fly and figuring out how to do things as you go. And I've also been working with such an incredibly amazing group of people in my health department and my health system. I couldn't ask for better colleagues.
That's great.
Yeah.
Dr. Rubin, what has this, experience taught you or told you about not returning to normal, but let me say maybe to a better resourced health system?
Yeah, interesting. As you may be aware, the public health system, not clinical system, but the public health system has been underfunded and under-resourced for decades now. And this has only become apparent in stark reality since the pandemic started. To see here in my health department, we had 150 employees for 2.5 million people. We used to have closer to 300, but our department had been whittled away over the years. City of Chicago, similarly, even though they have twice as many people as we do, but they also have been whittled down, as well as other health departments throughout the United States. And so now all of a sudden we're getting these resources for our health department. And what we really want to do is to leverage these resources to not only fight COVID, which of course is the main thing on our plate right now, but to leverage these resources to try to shore up the public health system in the United States. I worked overseas for 2 years in Mozambique. And I mean, it was an incredibly poor country, but their infrastructure for public health in many ways was stronger than it was in this country because they knew they had to prevent disease. So pushing out vaccination campaigns in rural areas and being able to go on our, four-wheel drive truck and going out to a small community, and all of the school kids would line up and they would all get vaccinated. And nobody would refuse to be vaccinated, right? Everybody would get vaccinated. So they knew that that's where their small amount of resources had to go into. In this country, no, the resources have been going into clinical care and into the private insurance industry. And that's a whole other conversation we could have another time. But in terms of trying to leverage what we're doing now, with COVID to try to shore up and improve and solidify the public health infrastructure in the United States is what all of health departments are trying to do.
So, I've thought about this a long time. Back when there was Y2K, remember Y2K?
Yes.
There was a book written about how community-based health care would become very, very important. And obvious if it was missing. For example, building readiness for an emergency would include, for example, stockpiling PPE and food supplies, possibly at local schools or locally at parks, other pieces of real estate that we, the citizens, own. Also having neighborhood kind of census of medical needs by area. How many people in my neighborhood require insulin, for example, to survive? How many are in treatment for dialysis or cancer? How to keep a medical census and simultaneously protect people's privacy and security are all the questions that what Michael just asked you about how we shouldn't return to normal are things that we've been thinking about. Do any of those ring true or make sense? I have another question to follow up, but
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was talking sort of more parochially about public health, but I can also say that everything is public health. And so that means food security. That means access to medical care, to medications, housing insecurity,
drug treatment.
transportation, all of these things, employment, safety for workers. I mean, that's one thing even with COVID that we're trying to work out so that we can go in and vaccinate large workplaces, because you can go in, you get a lot of people at once, you get them vaccinated, and these are critical infrastructure workers. So to address all of that, I mean, of course, you're absolutely right. And what we need to do is the idea of having a community-based approach to that, I think is very important to try to do. And we are trying to work with community-based organizations. We have anyway, traditionally in public health, but around COVID, and then to leverage those relationships going forward, because now we have a whole bunch of community-based organizations. So we've been giving some funding to and bringing in others to help with COVID. But the idea that then this might provide a better community-based network of organizations to help support, especially our communities that are most underserved, our Black and Brown communities. And that's been a real problem, because these are the communities that are hardest hit by a pandemic, but they're also hardest hit on a day-to-day basis. And so I couldn't agree more with what you're bringing up.
Tom, go ahead.
We've all heard the stories about how the virus particularly affected nursing homes, both residents and staff. What have you learned about what we should do in the future about congregate living situations to avoid this kind of problem?
Wow. To even ask me that question is really tough. I don't know if you know, but I lost both my parents to COVID in late December, early January. And they weren't living in a nursing home, but they were living in a senior building where there's independent living in their own apartment that also had a assisted living part of the building and skilled nursing, et cetera. And they were being so careful. We don't know how they got COVID. We think it might have been an emergency room visit. My father may have had a couple of days prior to getting tested positive, maybe from a caregiver that came in, and this is sort of where the nursing home issue comes in. We need to be so careful in terms of infection control in these facilities. We need to prioritize these populations of our most vulnerable, elderly populations, those living in congregate settings. And it's a really, it's a tough lift, because the people that work in these facilities, many of them tend to be low-wage workers, and the turnover in many of these facilities, not all, but in many of these congregate settings, the turnover is very high. So you constantly have to be training them on the appropriate procedures so that you don't transfer disease from one person to another. It's a monumental task, but we certainly pay a lot of attention to congregate settings. I mean, even prior to COVID, because we know that there's certain kinds of infections that can pass very quickly when you live in larger, sort of more communal or close settings where people are very close to each other, whether it's homes for developmentally challenged individuals or homeless shelters or nursing homes. And having especially training of staff, giving a living wage for these staff so that you maintain a strong, loyal workforce that know what they're doing and have the resources to do that are very important.
Rachel, before we let you,
ask you about, excuse me, let me ask you about challenged people. We have a friend, he's been on our show, Sean Harrington. He was a formidable basketball player. He's the subject of Russ Bradford's book, All the Dreams We Dreamed. He got shot trying to protect his daughter. He's paralyzed. He's having a hard time getting a shot. Now that maybe he needs to work harder at finding how he does it, but I'm here to ask you, how do people in a wheelchair get their shots?
No, that's a very good question. One thing that we're trying to do in Suburban Cook is that we have one medical group that's working with specifically, who are fantastic, who are working with home health agencies, and they are going into people's homes to vaccinate them. And we need to be putting more, now that we are beginning to get more vaccine, we need to be putting more resources into that. That means going to where people live. We're also going to be doing a pilot, we hope soon, where we're going to be going into senior buildings. That especially there are some publicly funded senior buildings in our jurisdiction to sort of start there potentially, and to go on site and to do vaccinations where people live. And that's very, as you can imagine, sort of labor intensive, because you need the same resources you might use for a large, huge mega site, even if you're doing it locally for, say, 100 residents that live in a senior building, or even if you're going one-on-one to somebody's individual apartment or home to vaccinate them. So it requires a lot of resources to do, even with smaller groups of individuals. But that is something that we are planning now in the health department. Now that we have these larger sites set up, we are now working on what we're calling our mobile strategy, to be able to try to address individuals like that, where they really can't make it necessarily even to their local clinic. I mean, we're also hoping that eventually the vaccine will be available in your own physician's office, just so we can go there on a yearly basis and get a flu shot. But we don't have that kind of infrastructure or push out yet from the government for that.
Dr. Rachel Rubin, we need to let you go back to practicing medicine, but before we leave you, is there one thing the media's missed or the public just doesn't get that you want to make sure they know about conquering this disease as we move on?
You know, I would just want to say that I would really ask people to be patient. We're trying to get out the vaccine to people as quickly as possible, and there's a prioritization scheme so that we get the most vulnerable first, our healthcare workers that are working with COVID patients first, then our older folks and our critical infrastructure workers, and then we're moving on to those that are with chronic conditions and everybody else. And I think that the plan that has been laid out in terms of these priorities are good, but people need to be patient, and we're trying to get you the vaccine as soon as possible. So in the meantime, and even once you get the vaccine, until we've had everybody vaccinated, please, wear your masks, maintain that physical distancing, wash your hands, and just try to be safe and care for each other.
Thank you so much, Rachel. We really appreciate your time and expertise, and be well.
Yeah, thank you
so much.
Thank you.
Soldiers coming home from another holy war. Did you fight to win, or are you losers? Walk back into a game show where the fortunate will spend and beggars won't be choosers. I'll walk a mile in your shoes, and this is what I'll say. I have your shoes, and now I'm a mile away.
Wow, that was a great tune. Is that your latest, Losers by Jon Langford?
Yeah.
Who's our next guest. Hi, John.
Hi, how you doing?
Welcome back.
That would be a series of singles I'm doing for a label in Spain. So that was one of the singles.
And what is the name of it again?
It's called Losers.
It is Losers. Okay, good.
What's that about?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious. It's a random series of quotes by our previous president, whose name I can't even remember now because he's flushed down the toilet of history. We hope. But,
that's the hope.
there was just that attitude that if everyone was a loser except him, but then who turned out to be the biggest loser in the end?
Well, if only he believed he was the loser. That's the thing we have to work on now.
Yeah,
listen, John,
history has a way of sorting things like that out.
Speaking of history, John, how about giving our billions of listeners a little bit of your own history, starting in your old homeland?
Yeah, I grew up in Newport in South Wales, which is a seaport town. To quote Dylan Thomas, a lovely, ugly town. And I came over here. Well, actually, I went up to art school in Leeds in Yorkshire when I was 18 or 19 or something like that, and formed a band called the Mekons.
Oh.
We had lots of adventures, and then 15 years later, I ended up over here in Chicago. I've been playing a lot in America from the mid-'80s onwards, and then by 1990, I think our band Herb Albert had fired our band from A&M Records, and I had really nothing to do. But my girlfriend at the time, we got together when she was living in France, Helen, but she was from Chicago and she was moving back here to go to grad school at UIC for architecture. So I came back. I came and lived here. For me, it sounds like a kind of big move, but really for me at the time, it was just like a very normal thing. I'd been coming to Chicago a lot for about 5 years, and I had a lot of friends here. And it was the one city in America that I felt most comfortable in. So it really reminded me of kind of industrial South Wales or industrial Yorkshire. There was a kind of similar attitude, that kind of second city attitude where like people up in Yorkshire just did not care what people in London were doing. They didn't, and the Welsh didn't care what people in London were doing. And I like that about Chicago, that we don't care what's going on in New York or LA. We just do our own thing. It's good.
That's right. That's right. So the pandemic has been pretty rough on musicians, given your penchant for actually wanting to be around people with your talents.
The hot, sweaty nights with loud music and lots of physical contact. I tend to miss that. Yeah. I cannot complain about anything. I also do paint. I'm a painter, so I have a painting studio, and I've been able to keep myself really busy. The people that I'm really sad for are the techs, the bar staff, the workers, the dishwashers, all the people who've been really, really affected. Anyone in the kind of hospitality entertainment business who does the jobs that make it run, those people have been hurt really, really badly. And I've done quite a bit of work for this organization, Civil, in Chicago, which is the Chicago Independent Venues League. Joe Shanahan from the Metro and K.E. Tutton from the Hideout are very involved in that. They're my sort of contact points with that. But we set about making a benefit album to try and raise money to promote them as a kind of lobbying group to get some support from federal government, et cetera, and state government for people, workers in the music business and entertainment industries, and also just to get money directly to those people. And we done an album of Tom Waits songs called the album is his first album, which was called Closing Time. But we thought it was a good idea so the album is called The Closing Time, and because we've had a year basically now,
John,
of things being shut.
How about dedicating a song to all those folks you just talked about?
Yeah.
Let's
all right.
try some live music.
You want some live music?
Yeah.
This is live music in 2021.
I'm ready. It's like our own little concert.
A man alone singing into his phone. Yeah. All right. And well, I'm a great believer in trade unionism. So coming from a socialist South Wales. So this song's called Plenty Tough Union Made. hurried to the town. Police and buses held us down. Back at the start when the ground was laid, plenty tough and union made. I don't think the king woke up one morning, said all the people should be better paid. No, things were bad, but things got changed. Plenty tough and union made. Plenty tough and union made. One long struggle day by day. That's how we got to be this way. Plenty tough and union made. Risked a lot to live like humans, locked up, beaten and defamed. No one said it was gonna be easy. Plenty tough and union made. Now the cowards cringe and the traitors sneer like a class war never happened here. Never forget as the future fades. Yeah, plenty tough and your union made. Plenty tough and union made. One long struggle day by day. That's how we got to live this way. Plenty tough and union made. Our rewards are not in heaven. Plenty tough and union made. Weak apart but strong together. Plenty tough and union made. Divided we fall, united we stand. Plenty tough and union made. So working woman and a working man. Plenty tough and union made. Plenty tough and union made. One long struggle day by day. That's how we got to be this way. Plenty tough and union made. Plenty tough and union made. Plenty tough and union made.
Hey, hey, hey! We like that. Well, Jon, you dedicated that to all the workers in the industry. Let's talk a little bit about what the pandemic has done to the bands. You and I both have kids who have had their dreams and their travel plans inhibited by this virus. And
Yeah.
Here at my house, our kid's productive. I'm sure yours is too. But in a broader sense, how do you think most musicians are handling this?
I think there's a lot of musicians who are finding it very, very hard because it's just, yeah, we live hand to mouth. If I didn't have my, the other thing that I do, like I said, with the painting, and that's been quite successful for me supporting what I do as a musician over the years. And I use the painting as a way to support my traveling and my rambling and my songwriting. But yeah, I don't know. It's very, very, very hard. I mean, you think of how many musicians will be playing on a single night in Chicago like 18 months ago.
Right.
It's crazy, but it's even. Yeah, I mean, at every level of the techs, the sound guy, the theater people. Chicago's such a great theater town. It's horrible, I wonder how people get by. I mean, that's why we've tried to do benefits and tried to support people who are lobbying in Washington. But the brakes seem to be on now with this. We thought we'd made a big breakthrough, but it goes to Congress and where's the money? People need the money now. They need it. They need help. They need support. And a city like Chicago, it's pretty incredible to me that they're still making bars pay their liquor licenses. Can you believe that, when they haven't been able to sell any liquor? But this city, it does. And why do people come? It's a big tourist city. People visit you. They visit you for the grassroots culture, theater, music, restaurants. That's why people come here. And I haven't seen the city of Chicago doing very, very much to support those. What makes the city great? It's the Rahm Emanuel kind of hangover. We're just still completely reliant on corporate. It's the corporations that solve. Corporations will solve everything. It's like this kind of libertarian neoliberal dream that's just a load of bullshit. So.
Well, it's kind of why we were so proud of the Chicago Independent Venue League civil that you spoke of.
Yeah.
Because you guys started off of reacting before the pandemic. You started off of standing up for development that does not close people out or does not turn us into a city of the 1%.
The city of Chicago giving TIF money to a corporation that's going to build venues that put the grassroots venues out of business. Where's the sense in that? and they rush it through so they can get the money through without any proper, public review of it. And now, if you go over to the Lincoln Yards site, I wonder what they're going to do. Because people are staying home. People don't need big office blocks. People are moving. People don't want to be in the city. They're not going to build a soccer stadium. They're not going to build a 6-venue thing. I mean, they're getting all this money, and there's no plan whatsoever. It's just a big ugly site where they're turning the soil over and pretending to clean it up. But,
What's the latest on the Hideout? Because they're in that zone, and I know that they were active.
Hideout. I don't think anyone even asked the Hideout. No one ever tried to buy them out or anything. No. They've had this kind of the alderman. It just gives this kind of, oh, we love the Hideout. The Lincoln, what are they called? Sterling Bay people. We love the Hideout. We want to be partners with the Hideout. But they built a big soccer field opposite the Hideout with spent millions on that, which I guess is a facility. They're actually, it's open all the time, which I thought was kind of illegal because the parks were meant to be shut. But I don't know. I
can't stop the soccer players.
I diverge. But there's one.
So I think
if you got money, there's one law for the people with the money and one law and another law for the rest of us. And the city needs to get itself sorted out and get its priorities right, or the whole entertainment business here is going to die.
Amen.
So I think for the first time in a year, we're going to make a concert announcement. Tell us what's happening on March 19th.
Wow. We actually put the concert, that's sold out. We've got a massive concert at the G-Man Tavern. Basically, it's a celebration of our drummer, Joe Camarillo, who died earlier this year. He died in January. It's massive blow. We've been playing with him for 20 years. Longer than 20 years, and we called him the mayor of Posen. He lived in Posen, Illinois, way down. Posen's a little township behind a Walgreens on the far south side, and it's Joe lived there with his mom, and we've been working with him I think since 1999, and we've had lots of adventures, lots of travel. 20 years ago, we were in Australia with him, and he's had his battles with his health, but we got kind of used to him bouncing back. So it was a massive shock and a blow, and we hadn't really seen him either because of the pandemic. He was on a high risk, and we'd had a few things we did last summer, and we asked him to come and play with us, but his doctors had advised him just to lay low till the pandemic was over because he couldn't risk catching it. But so we're going to celebrate him, his music. I mean, the most musical of drummers. There's all sorts of drummer jokes. None of them applied to Joe because he was a great singer, a great musician, a songwriter, and a listener. He loved music, and when he played with us, he listened to what we were doing, and he tried to fit in and do what was needed to benefit, to all in service of the song and the band and the project. He's an amazing guy. I mean, we're all devastated, obviously. Joe Shanahan, the week after Joe died, Joe Shanahan asked me if we could put something up on the marquee of the Metro on North Clark Street as a kind of to commemorate him. And I had a word with Dawn, his girlfriend, and his sister Rose, and knowing Joe's wicked sense of humor, we all came up with the same thing simultaneously, and so Joe happily put up Joe Camarillo. It was 1968 to 2021. So now I get on the marquee.
Well, I'm glad I got to see him. Last time I saw the actual Waco brothers kicking it out was down there at South by Southwest in 2013. And it was quite.
I remember that because I didn't know you had any connection with Twin Peaks because my son had told me about Twin Peaks, so I got them that gig at the Ginger Man.
You were great. You were really good to them.
And then you walk up to him and said, "Hello, John." And I went, "Hello, Mike. What are you doing here?" And he said, "Well, that's my son's band." I was like, I had no idea. So that was the kids circumventing us. But
they don't need us.
Well, anyway, what we've done actually, I'll just say this, but right, I believe hopefully there'll still be tickets left, but. We're going to do 2 extra shows on Sunday, March the 21st, because the ones on March the 19th sold out immediately. But we wanted to do March the 19th because that's also South by Southwest, and it's the Friday of South by Southwest. We always played a party for 20. This would have been the 25th year we played a party in the back of the Yard Dog Art Gallery. Who are the people who've kept me solvent throughout this pandemic by selling my art online. And that hasn't happened. It didn't happen last year, and it's not going to happen this year. And that's a great shame, because that was pretty much one of the craziest and most enjoyable events I've ever been involved in. And every year people would cram into this little kind of yard behind the shop on South Congress in Austin. And it was we had amazing people come and play, but the Wacos would always headline it. Fully fueled Waco brothers would, full of cactus juice, would headline that gig.
And Kelly Hogan.
Oh yeah, Hogan used to be there. Andre Williams used to do it. J.C. Brooks, Bottle Rockets. You name them. Robbie Folks. Tons and tons of bands from Chicago, and it was great because every year we'd be down in Austin, and the Waco brothers would be playing to a load of people who were, basically drunkenly altered, and I think they would go home afterwards. And they would imagine they'd seen us sometime in the year in their own hometown. So it meant we never had to go on tour because we could just play to people all over the country in Austin every year. So we will go on stage at 6:00 on March the 19th at the G-Man. And I think we're going to do a live stream of that as well. But that's to celebrate Joe and the great times we've, had over the years in Austin at this time of year.
Where would people look to find the link to the added on concerts, which you should call Vernal Equinox Celebration?
G-Man Tavern, I think. G-Man Tavern, it'll have a link to it.
G-Man Tavern. Okay.
Go to John's Facebook page. You can find all you need to know.
Yeah, and there's a Waco Brothers. The Waco Brothers Want to Kick Your Ass is a group on Facebook. So
cool. So would you like to go out with another live music?
Yeah.
Hey, let's try it.
Use a song. The last Waco Brothers album was called Going Down in History. And when we made, I'm so happy we made that album because our plan was just to let our rhythm section kind of dominate because we've been very sort of song based and we'd write songs. And with this one, we went into the studio and we just had very, very simple ideas for the songs. And we let the kind of rhythm section, Alan Doughty and Joe Camarillo, kind of dictate what happened. And just, we encouraged them to just play, really come out of themselves and dominate the songs. So it's much more like much groovier and much more of a band record than anything we've ever done before. So this song's the title track. It's called Going Down in History. Well, it's all gone. You used up everything. Better find something to put in its place. You gotta walk before you can fall down on your face. You gotta bite the hand that feeds you. 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 You're going down. You're going down. You're going down. Oh, you're going down in history.
Woo!
Well, it's a stretch. Time is so elastic. You better find something to put in its place. Commit to something drastic. Commit to something drastic. Commit to something drastic. Commit to something drastic. You're going down, going down. You're going down, going down. You're going down, going down. Well, you're going down in history. Gotta haul the bastards over. You gotta haul the bastards over. You gotta haul the bastards over. You gotta haul the bastards over. You're going down, going down. You're going down, going down. You're going down, memory. You're going down in history.
Oh, there are billions of people applauding this now.
I
That was good.
hope so. Thank you very much, Mike.
Jon Langford, thank you so much for joining Heartland at Home. Hope to see you inside of a studio or outside, 6 feet apart.
Yes.
Soon.
How many shots have you
I
gotten?
need some cuddles.
Yes.
Yeah. Let me ask you, have you gotten any shots yet, John?
Oh, it's a bit early yet, Mike.
Any jabs?
Oh, I see. Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Did I sound
Arm
like I had a
juice.
couple of shots before I played? No. No, I haven't actually. I'm waiting my turn.
That a baby.
I'm
Well,
only 23 years old and I'm in perfect health, so I have
There
to
you
wait my
go.
turn.
well, we're looking forward to coming to see you. Katie and I have both gotten our shots. Tom's about to finish up. And I want to come look at your artwork in a closer way. I remember seeing it out at some record store where Twin Peaks was playing. And that's when I first learned that you were doing this great artwork. So I want more of it.
Okay, well, we're all living online at the moment, so it's all out there. Great. Good luck with everything. Good luck with the Heartland.
Adios, brother. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you very much.
We got a couple of announcements. Our music producer, Lynn Ormond, has put together a wonderful exhibit, womenoftheblues.org, and it's currently on exhibit at Delmark Records. Look it up. You'd like to go see it.
Also, events coming up. The Loyola School of Environment, Loyola University School of Environment is once again hosting the Climate Change Conference this year, March 15th to 18th, and it's focusing on youth-led activism. Also today, right after the show is over, we will, the neighborhood activists of Network 49 continue to pin down the action plan for 2021 in 3 separate Zoom meetings that you can attend all of, 1 of, 2 of, dealing with education, politics, and health. For links to the meetings, see Network 49 Facebook page.
And just to remind you, this is the time to vote in the 49th Ward for participatory budgeting. There are 3 policy questions in addition to infrastructure improvements. Please check it out. Any adult in the ward can vote.
Actually, anyone over 16, right, Tom?
Correct.
Yeah, anyone over 16 or 17. In our Rest in Peace Memoriam segment of the show, we want to just note Vernon Jordan, an incredible mover and shaker, a Washington power broker. Most significantly, after his longtime leading of the National Urban League, was single-handedly did his best to diversify the corporate leadership, grooming African-American execs over the last couple or 3 decades.
And we want to mark the passing of the last surviving member of the Whalers. Bunny Whaler passed this past week. We're going to celebrate him and the legacy of Bob Marley and Peter Tosh with a little bit of stirring it up as we go out with the show today.
Don't forget to tune in next week. Listen in, watch us however you do it. We'll have Lynn Jordan and Felicia Davis of the Chicago Foundation for Women.
Good for March, Women's History Month. For over 25 years, we have brought you live from the Heartland. Now, Heartland at Home, broadcast every Saturday morning at 9 Central by our friends at Loyola University's WLUW 88.7 FM, also streaming live on WLUW.org. We are archived on our channel at youtube.com/Heartland Media. And if you like TV, turn on CAN TV, channel 27. You're going to find Heartland showing up.
Please do good in the world.
The world needs all the good we do.
All power to the people.
Have a great week, folks.